Callum wants to speak to us from Acton. Go for it, Callum.
Hi there, Maajid. How are you?
Welcome. Tell us what you think.
To be honest, I've got sort of maybe a bit of a strange opinion on this one.
Yeah.
I was actually a member of Momentum from 2016 up to quite recently. And in 2017, I even campaigned with Laura Smith in the Crewe Nantwich constituency.
Yeah.
And I've obviously been on the Jeremy Corbyn wing of the party since.
Indeed.
But over the past couple of weeks, especially with the sacking of Rebecca Long-Bailey, I've sort of had to reconsider my position.
Love it. Love it. So you've been doing some thinking, huh?
Yeah, I suppose I've had to, really, because if my goal is to help get Labour elected, then obviously I need to make sure that I've got the right sort of strategy and vision in mind for that.
And by reconsidering your position, when these polls came out, and now you see that despite, in spite of Keir Starmer sacking Rebecca Long-Bailey, he's now ahead of Boris Johnson in the polls. Does that help you reconsider your position? Does it validate your thought process?
Yes, it does. It does, because obviously for me, the one thing I want to avoid is obviously a Tory government. So, and plus Keir Starmer he a lot of the positions I hold, he still champions them. So I have nothing against him. So I'm more than happy to support him all the way. And especially
Callum, have you been listening to this show for a while, or have you just recently tuned into my show?
I've listened to it now and then, but mainly through YouTube clips.
Right. So were you aware I was very anti-Corbyn?
Yes. Yeah.
And had you, in your Corbyn years, when you were active on his side as Labour leader, had you interpreted that as me being anti-left wing?
Well, yes. I've perceived you as more of a classic liberal. Is that? Would you say that's right? Or?
Well, I don't want to define myself. I'm interested. Now, of course, those who are globalists, such as myself, would say in the long term it's better for the economy. In the fact that my criticism of Jeremy Corbyn, very, very frequent and regular criticism of Jeremy Corbyn, was obviously interpreted by his supporters as that means I'm a Tory, when actually perhaps now with the reality ahead of them, they can see what I was trying to do and what I was trying to say.
Yeah, because one of the things I sort of realised is that obviously under Tony Blair, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party were near enough the same thing, but Keir Starmer is still probably more left than Tony Blair, for example, like in terms of obviously on cultural and social issues. Keir Starmer is still likely to support Black Lives Matter and obviously the Black Trans Lives Matter. And
in answer to your question more directly, though, I don't define myself for a reason, and that is that I try and take things on an issue-by-issue basis and understand them reasonably and rationally, and then adopt a position on them. I've stopped defining myself as left and right, not that I hold it against anyone else that does, but I'm interested in what you just said there about Starmer still supporting the causes, because that's how I feel, right? So if a leader of any political party backs certain things I care about, that are more important to me than other things I care about, then that makes me warm to that personality. But more important than that for me is, on a level that transcends party politics, is what I'm really encouraged by is having these sorts of conversations with people like you, Callum, because what I'm more interested in than party politics is thought processes, critical thinking, and elevating the discussion beyond ad hominem, beyond petty jibes, beyond partisanship, beyond ideological baggage, so that we can all advance in our common interest.
Yeah, one thing that's also shook me recently, you were talking about the far right before, and I've noticed back home, I have a lot of friends that I think are turning to the far right, actually.
Yeah, really? When you say back home, where do you mean? You say far right back home, where's back home? You mean your hometown?
Yes.
Do you want to name where that is? You don't have to, by the way.
It's a town called Crewe.
C-R-E-W?
Yes, an E.
Okay. When you say C-R-E-W-E, and when you say turning to the far right, do you mean like indisputably neo-Nazi, or you just mean populist?
No, indisputably far right. I mean talking about anti-Semitic talking points.
Wow.
Talking about demographics, saying that we're going to be replaced by 2066.
Amazing.
Telling me to vote for patriotic alternative.
Do you know, Callum, that the fastest growing terrorism convictions in this country are of the far right? Now, that doesn't mean they've superseded in numbers terms the jihadists. The jihadists are still the most in numbers, but the far right are the fastest growing terrorism convictions.
Yeah, and one of them was even telling me, I'm not sure what your thoughts on this. He was telling me to research to grooming gangs. And apparently 18,000 white girls get raped every year.
Yeah, but the thing is, the problem with that is that there's a parable that I'd like to relate to you that actually comes from Islamic history. My Muslim listeners will be aware of this. When Imam Ali was trying to negotiate with one of the rebels, Muawiyah, but I'll spare the Arabic details and stuff, but the basic parable is a word of truth said for an unjust cause. Kalimat al-haq li gharadin batil. What it means is that you can say something true, but actually your motivated reasoning is you're trying to achieve something else. So, for example, to give you a most extreme example, during the Weimar Republic, before Hitler came to power, it was true that the reparations were damaging Germany's economy, right?
Yeah.
So it was true when Hitler was campaigning to say, look at you all workers, you're starving, I'm going to save you from this. That complaint was correct. They were hungry. They were, there was a deep recession, economic depression in Germany because of the reparations after losing World War I. So that was true. But what he wanted to do with that truth was evil. And so it's true. Go on.
Sorry. I think my friends have a similar thing. They're telling me that every war that we've had over the last 20 years, we've always put Rothschild's banks in afterwards, and that in Nazi Germany, in Weimar Germany, a lot of the sort of transsexual thing was run by people like Magnus Hirschfeld, and that will be a minority by 2066, and that everyone's just...
So what do you say to them about that, Callum?
Sometimes, about a year ago, I just called them, obviously I still think so, but I just call them racist, Nazi, homophobe, bigot, but now I'm not agreeing with it, but sometimes I'll just tell them, prove it, and sometimes I can't, they do.
All right, Callum, you know what? Thank you very much. I advise you not to just say, yeah, that's true. I suspect that Callum has a different agenda going on himself. And so thank you anyway, Callum. We had a long enough chat with you. Guys, there is this phenomenon, just to clarify for everyone listening right now. I'm not going to accuse Callum of this. There is this phenomenon of people that sympathise with those views calling onto radio simply to get airtime to propagate them. And the clue there in that conversation was when I say to Callum, how do you respond to people saying the Jews are controlling the world? He says, I ask them for proof, they provide me proof, and I have no answer. That there is an indication that Callum was doing what you call groyping, which is being a far-right speaker, calling onto a radio show, pretending to want a conversation about how to disagree with the far-right while pushing far-right talking points. So if you ever are in a conversation like that, listeners, that's good because it's a teaching moment. It's an instructive moment for everybody there. If you're ever in a conversation online with somebody pretending that they want you to help them challenge far-right narratives while saying, but actually, here are all the facts they gave me and I can't answer them, what they're trying to do is convert you to far-right narratives. Now, as I say, I'm not saying Callum was doing that, but the clue that could be happening is in that question, how do you respond to them? And it's usually, but when they gave me the facts, I didn't have an answer. And that's the clue to indicate to you that something else is afoot here. The motivated reasoning that I spoke of when I said, when you're speaking a word of truth for an unjust cause, how you can determine whether their cause is unjust is by asking them what their own reputations are for far-right narratives. And if they try and tell you they don't have them, then you've got to be very careful they're not trying to secretly recruit you to those narratives themselves. The far-right are definitely rising in this country. I hope Callum is not one of them. If he is, Callum, if you're listening, if you are, you desperately need help, mate. You're not sound in your mind. You need help. And I hope you're not. But actually, I promise you there's absolutely no way that you're going to try and pull one over my eyes on this stuff, because I've spent many years as an ideologue. I see through it immediately. And the only reason I'm the man I am now is because I travelled that journey you travelled, Callum. And I used to be an anti-Semite. And I used to promote all the narratives you promoted. I was also, by the way, a homophobe. I was also probably a racist, but I was 16 years old, Callum. I'm now 42, which is also the answer to the universe. So, Callum, my advice to you is, seriously, if you are of the groyping mentality, genuinely get help. Like, seriously, don't try and prank people on radio. Genuinely get help. You're unwell. 0345 60 60973. Yusuf, we're going to come to you in a moment, as I promised. For the moment, it's time for the news headlines.